The air smelled of fresh earth and expensive perfume, a combination that would haunt Mrs. Rebecca Donald for the rest of her life. She sat in the front row of white plastic chairs arranged before her son's coffin, a black veil covering her face, her hands clutching a handkerchief that had long since been soaked through with tears. The lace trim of her black dress fluttered slightly in the morning breeze. Around her, the cemetery was packed with mourners, employees from Donald Enterprises in their dark suits, neighbors from Sunrise Estate dabbing at their eyes, business partners whispering condolences, and even the street vendors who had known James from his morning jogs. Because that was the thing about James Donald, everyone loved him. The gatemen, the housemaids, the CEOs. It didn't matter who you were. If you met James, you walked away feeling like the world was a little bit brighter. And now he was gone. Pastor William stood before the gleaming mahogany coffin, his worn leather Bible open to Ecclesiastes. His voice was solemn, practiced, the voice of a man who had presided over too many funerals. To everything there is a season, he intoned, and a time to every purpose under heaven. A time to be born and a time to die. A time to plant and a time to pluck up that which is planted. No! The word ripped through the cemetery like a thunderclap. Every head turned. The pastor's voice died mid-sentence. Even the birds in the trees seemed to stop singing. At the back of the gathering, pushing through the crowd of mourners like a woman possessed, was Lolo. She wore her usual tattered purple dress, faded and stained, torn at the hem, the kind of dress that had probably been beautiful once, perhaps decades ago. Her feet were bare and caked with red Lagos dirt. Her hair was a wild nest of gray and black, matted and uncombed, standing out in all directions like she'd been struck by lightning. Her face was weathered and lined, her skin darkened by years under the sun. But her eyes were ablaze with something that looked like pure desperation. "No, no, no," she screamed, shoving past a man in an expensive agbade who stumbled backward, his face twisted in disgust. He not dead, Jesus Christ," someone muttered from the crowd. "Who let the mad woman in here?" "This is a funeral, not a marketplace," another voice hissed. "Somebody get her out." But Lolo wasn't listening. She was charging toward the coffin with single-minded determination, her arms flailing, her voice rising higher and higher with each step. He alive, not dead, not dead." Mrs. Donald lifted her head slightly, her grief momentarily pierced by confusion. Through the black lace of her veil, she could see Lolo stumbling forward, tears streaming down her weathered face, leaving clean tracks through the dirt on her cheeks. 3 rows back, standing perfectly composed in a tailored Chanel dress, was Emily. Her makeup was flawless despite the delicate tears she'd been dabbing at with a silk handkerchief. Her red lipstick was perfect. Her designer sunglasses perched elegantly on her head. Her twins flanked her on either side. The boy in a crisp black suit, the girl in a modest black dress, both with their heads bowed in what looked like genuine sorrow. "Save him! Save him!" Lolo shrieked, her voice cracking, and then her bony finger shot out, pointing directly at Emily like an accusation. She evil, she kill him." The crowd gasped. Whispers erupted like wildfire. Emily's face went pale beneath her foundation. "What is she talking about?" she said loudly, her voice pitched with just the right amount of confusion and offense. "Why is this woman pointing at me?" "She evil," Lolo screamed again, now just a few feet from the coffin. Her voice was raw, primal. She poison, save him, he alive, Mr. James alive." "That's enough." Big Joseph, the head of estate security, a mountain of a man with shoulders like a door frame, stepped forward. His massive hands reached for Lolo's thin shoulders. "Come on now, Lolo. This isn't the place." Lolo whirled on him with the speed and ferocity of a cornered animal. Her hand shot out and grabbed a thick branch from beneath a nearby tree. Before Big Joseph could blink, she was swinging it at his head. "Don't touch me," she snarled. "Don't touch. He alive." Big Joseph raised his hands in surrender, backing away. Two more security men tried to approach from different angles, but Lolo swung the branch in a wide arc, and they both jumped back. "She's completely insane," someone whispered loudly. "Somebody call the police." "This is disrespectful. We're trying to bury the man." The whispers grew louder, turning into a buzz of confusion and irritation. The pastor looked at Mrs. Donald helplessly, clearly unsure how to proceed. And through it all, Lolo kept screaming, "Save him! Save him! She evil. He not dead. Not dead." She was at the coffin now, her makeshift weapon clattering to the ground as she reached for the polished wood with trembling, dirt-caked hands. Her fingers scrabbled at the lid, trying desperately to pry it open. "Get her away from there!" Emily's voice rang out, sharp and commanding. "How dare this mad woman put her filthy hands on him? Someone do something!" Three more men moved forward, but Lolo spun around and screamed with such raw anguish that they froze. "No touch! No touch! Healive! Mr. James alive!" And then, cutting through the chaos like a knife, came a voice that everyone recognized. "Stop!" Mrs. Rebecca Donald stood up. She moved slowly, her black veil fluttering as she walked toward the coffin. The crowd parted for her automatically, people stepping aside with murmured condolences that she didn't acknowledge. When Mrs. Donald reached Lolo, she didn't try to grab her or restrain her. She just stood there. "Lolo," Mrs. Donald said quietly, "what's wrong? Why are you saying these things?" Lolo's wild eyes focused on her. "Mama," she whimpered, "Mama, he alive. Mr. James alive. Not dead, not dead. Lolo, sweetheart, I know this is hard to accept." "No!" Lolo shook her head violently. "No hard. True, he breathing. He alive. She poison. She poisoned Mr. James. Evil. Evil." Mrs. Donald stared at the coffin, at her son's face so peaceful behind the glass, and something in her chest twisted. "Lolo," she said slowly, "you're saying James is alive right now?" Lolo nodded frantically. "Alive. Alive. Save him, Mama. Please save Mr. James." Mrs. Donald didn't know what possessed her in that moment. Grief, desperation, hope. But she reached for the coffin lid and opened it fully. James lay there, dressed in his best hood, his hands folded over his chest, his eyes closed. Lolo didn't hesitate. She placed both her weathered hands on James's chest and began pressing, pumping frantically with no rhythm, just pure desperate love. "Breathe! Breathe, Mr. James! Wake up!" The crowd watched in stunned silence. Some were shaking their heads. Others had their hands over their mouths. Mrs. Donald stood frozen, her heart pounding so loud she could hear it in her ears. And then James coughed. It was soft at first, barely audible. But then he coughed again, harder this time, his body convulsing slightly. His chest rose and fell beneath Lolo's hands. The cemetery erupted in screams. But to understand how we got here, how a dead man coughed in his coffin, and why a mad woman was the only one who knew the truth, we need to go back. Back to 3 months earlier, when life was simple, when James Donald was alive, beloved, and had no idea that death was already being poured into his cup. 3 months earlier, James Donald woke up every morning at 5:30 a.m. like clockwork. Not because he had to, he was the CEO of Donald Enterprises. He could roll into the office at noon if he wanted, but because he genuinely loved mornings. The quiet, the stillness, the way Lagos held its breath before the chaos of the day began. By 6 a.m., he'd be lacing up his running shoes, stretching on the front steps of the Donald mansion, breathing in the cool morning air. "You're going again?" his mother would sometimes call from the doorway. Wrapped in her silk robe, a cup of tea in her hands. "You know you could just use the treadmill in the gym." "Where's the fun in that, Mom?" James would reply with that trademark grin of his. How would I see the neighborhood? Talk to people? And that was the thing about James. He actually wanted to talk to people, not because he had to network or maintain appearances, but because he genuinely enjoyed it. Every morning he'd jog through Sunrise Estate, and every morning people would light up when they saw him. "Good morning, Mr. James," the gateman would chorus, snapping to attention. "Morning, guys. How was your night?" He'd slow down to chat, ask about their families, remember their children's names. "Mr. James, good morning, oh." Mama Ngozi, who sold a kara by the roadside, would wave her oil-stained spatula at him. "Morning, Mama. Save me some akara for my way back, yeah." "Ah, but you never eat You always give to that woman, because she needs it more than I do," James would call over his shoulder, already jogging away. That woman Mama Ngozi referred to was Lolo. Everyone in the Sunrise Estate knew Lolo. She'd been there for as long as anyone could remember, a fixture of the neighborhood like the old mango tree by the gates or the pothole on the main road that never got fixed. Nobody knew her real name. Nobody knew where she'd come from. She was just Lolo, the mad woman. She lived in a small wooden shelter about 100 meters from the estate gates, a structure that Chief Donald had commissioned 15 years ago after yet another failed attempt to get Lolo into proper housing. "If she won't live in a house, at least let her have shelter from the rain," he'd told the carpenter, "and make it sturdy. She deserves that much." The shelter was simple but solid. 4 wooden walls, a tin roof, a small opening for a door, no windows, no electricity, but it was hers, and Lolo seemed content with it, and every morning without fail, James would jog past Lolo's shelter. "Good morning, Lolo." And every morning without fail, Lolo would emerge, her hair wild, her dress tattered, her face breaking into that gap-toothed smile. "Good morning, Mr. James." It was their ritual, their routine, as predictable as sunrise. But the real magic happened in the evenings. Every day at exactly 6 p.m., Lolo would leave her shelter and walk to the estate gates. She'd stand there, rain or shine, hot or cold, and wait. If James was on time, his car would pull up at 6:15 p.m. The moment Lolo spotted his black Mercedes, she'd start jumping up and down like a child who'd just been given candy, waving frantically. James would slow down, roll down his window, and hand her a takeout bag. "Fried chicken today, Lolo, your favorite." "Thank you, Mr. James. God bless you. God bless you plenty." If James was running late, stuck in Lagos traffic, or held up in a meeting, Lolo would wait. 7 p.m., 8 p.m., 9 p.m. She'd stand at that gate, unmoving, her eyes fixed on the road, until his car appeared. The gateman had tried to send her away before. "Lolo, go home. Mr. James will come when he comes. You don't need to stand here." But Lolo would shake her head stubbornly. "I wait. Mr. James coming." "I wait," and she would, for hours, until James finally pulled up, usually with an apologetic smile and an extra-large bag of food. "Sorry I'm late, Lolo. Traffic was mad today." "No problem, Mr. James. Lolo, wait. Lolo, always wait." People in the estate thought it was odd. "Why is he so nice to that mad woman?" they'd whisper. "You know he buys her food every single day? Every single day. She doesn't even wear the clothes he gives her. Just hoards them in that shelter. It's a waste of money if you ask me." But nobody asked James, and even if they had, he wouldn't have cared. To him, Lolo wasn't crazy. She was just different, and she was the most loyal person he'd ever met. "She waits for me, Mom," he told his mother once. "Every single day, no matter how late I am, no matter how tired she must be, she waits." When was the last time someone in this city waited for anyone like that? Mrs. Donald had smiled softly at her son. "You have a good heart, James." Just like your father, that conversation had happened 2 weeks before Chief Donald's stroke. The stroke came without warning. One moment, Chief Donald was in his study, reviewing quarterly reports. The next moment, he was on the floor, his left side completely paralyzed, his words slurred beyond recognition. The doctors at Lagoon Hospital worked quickly. They stabilized him, ran tests, prescribed medication. But the prognosis was grim. The stroke was severe, Dr. Mike had explained, his expression grave. He'll need extensive physical therapy, and even then he may never fully recover. The stress of running a company. I'm sorry, Chief, but your working days are over. Chief Donald had wept that night, not because of the paralysis, though that was bad enough, but because Donald Enterprises was his life, his legacy, the empire he'd built from nothing with his wife's trust fund and his own sweat and blood. What happens to the company now? He'd whispered to his wife, his words thick and difficult. Mrs. Donald had taken his hand, his good hand, and squeezed gently. James will take over. He's ready. You've trained him well. And so, 3 weeks after the stroke, James Donald became the CEO of Donald Enterprises. He was 32 years old. The board of directors had their doubts. He's too young, some said. Too soft, others muttered. His father built this company with an iron fist. James is all smiles and handshakes. They were wrong. Within 6 months, James had transformed the company. He introduced new technologies, cloud-based systems that streamlined operations, AI tools that improved efficiency. He implemented flexible working hours, remote work options, better healthcare benefits. The employees who had respected Chief Donald loved James. He actually listens to us, one manager said during a staff meeting. He remembers my daughter's name, another added. The CEO remembers my daughter's name. Profits soared. Client satisfaction increased. Donald Enterprises was thriving under James's leadership. Life was good. Chief Donald, watching from his wheelchair, was proud. Mrs. Donald, seeing her son flourish, was grateful. James himself was content. He had his work, his family, his morning jogs, his evening ritual with Lolo. Everything was perfect. Everything was simple. Until the day Emily showed up. It was a Tuesday afternoon, the kind of Lagos Tuesday where the sun was too hot and the traffic was too thick, and everyone was already exhausted by noon. Samuel the gateman was dozing in his post when the banging started. Bang, bang, bang. He jolted awake and nearly spilling his bottle of Coke. Who be that? He opened the small window in the gate and found himself staring at a woman who looked like she'd stepped out of a magazine. She was probably in her mid-40s, but she wore it well. Her dress was designer, form-fitting, elegant, the kind of thing that cost more than Samuel made in 6 months. Her nails were long and perfectly manicured, painted a deep crimson. Her makeup was flawless, foundation, contour, red lipstick that matched her nails, designer sunglasses perched on her head like a crown. She carried herself like someone who was used to getting what she wanted. Behind her stood 2 teenagers, twins by the look of them. A boy and a girl, maybe 14 or 15. They both had the sullen, uncomfortable expressions of children who didn't want to be wherever they were. And at the woman's feet sat a large box overflowing with clothes. I'm here to see my husband, the woman announced. Samuel blinked. Madam? My husband, Chief Donald. Tell him his wife is here. Samuel's brain stuttered. Madam, I think you get the wrong address. This na Donald family house, yes, but Chief Donald already get wife, Mrs. Rebecca Donald. And Mr. James no marry yet. I'm not here for James, the woman interrupted, her voice sharp. I'm here for Chief. Tell him Emily is here, Emily and his children. The words hung in the air like a grenade with the pin pulled. Samuel's mouth fell open. And Madam, I think to say, I know what I'm saying. Emily's voice rose, turning heads on the street. This is my husband's house. Chief Donald is my husband. And these, she gestured dramatically at the teenagers, are his children. Now open this gate before I start making a scene. Madam, please calm down. But Emily wasn't interested in calming down. She started banging on the gate again, harder this time, her voice rising to a shout. "Chief Donald! Chief, I know you're in there. It's Emily. I'm here with your children." The commotion was loud enough to wake the dead. Neighbors peered out of their windows. A few people on the street stopped to watch the drama unfold. Inside the mansion, Mrs. Rebecca Donald had been arranging flowers in the sitting room when she heard the shouting. She paused, her hand still holding a white lily, her brow furrowed. "What on earth is all that noise?" she murmured. James, who had been in the study reviewing contracts, heard it too. He came out of the study at the same time his mother stepped out of the sitting room. Their eyes met. "Is someone shouting at our gate?" James asked. "It sounds like it." Mrs. Donald set down the flower. "Let's go see what's going on." They walked to the gate together, mother and son, both utterly unprepared for what they were about to face. When they reached the gate, Samuel was practically vibrating with stress. "Sure, madam, thank God you come. This woman, she says she be chief's wife, and these children be his children, and she dey shout, say make I open gate. But I tell 'em say, let me see her," Mrs. Donald said quietly. Samuel opened in the small window, and Mrs. Donald peered through. The first thing she noticed was how beautiful the woman was. Polished, put together, expensive. The second thing she noticed was the burning determination in the woman's eyes. "Who are you, Mrs. Donald asked, her voice calm but cold. Emily's lips curved into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Hello, Mrs. Donald. I'm Emily, your husband's second wife, and these are his children. Your stepchildren, I suppose. We're here to see him. I heard he's sick." The world tilted. Mrs. Donald felt like she'd been slapped. Her vision blurred at the edges. Her heart started pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. Second wife. Second wife. James stepped forward, his face tight. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but you must have the wrong house. My father doesn't have a second wife. He's been married to my mother for 40 years, and I'm an only child." Emily laughed, a sharp, brittle sound. "Oh, sweet boy. You really don't know, do you? Well, why don't we ask Chief himself? Chief! Chief Donald! Come out here and tell them the truth." Mrs. Donald's hands were shaking. She gripped the gate to steady herself. "You need to leave. Right now." "I'm not going anywhere," Emily said firmly. "Not until I see my husband. Not until my children get what they deserve. We've been kicked out of our home, Mrs. Donald. We have nowhere to go, and I'll be damned if my children suffer because their father was too much of a coward to tell you about us." "This is ridiculous," James said, his voice rising. "My father would never." "Wouldn't he?" Emily's eyes glittered. "You think you know him so well. Ask him about 15 years ago. Ask him about the business trip to Abuja. Ask him about the Transcorp Hilton Hotel. Ask him who he spent that night with." Mrs. Donald's blood ran cold because she remembered that trip. Chief Donald had gone to Abuja for a contract negotiation. He'd been gone for a week. When he came back, he'd been different, distant, guilty, almost. She'd asked him if something was wrong. "Just tired," he'd said. The negotiations were rough. She'd believed him. God help her, she'd believed him. "Open the gate," Mrs. Donald heard herself say. "Mom," James started. "Open it," she repeated, her voice hollow. Samuel hesitated, then slowly swung the gate open. Emily walked in like she owned the place, her twins trailing behind her, the box of clothes forgotten on the street. Mrs. Donald turned and walked back to the house without a word. James followed, shooting confused, angry glances at Emily. They found Chief Donald in the sitting room, in his wheelchair, his nurse reading a newspaper to him. When he saw Emily walk through the door, the color drained from his face. "Emily," he whispered, his speech still slurred from the stroke. What are you doing here?" Emily's smile was triumphant. "Hello, darling." Surprise! Mrs. Donald stood perfectly still. "So you do know her?" Chief Donald's eyes filled with tears. "Rebecca, don't!" Mrs. Donald's voice was like ice. Don't you dare say my name right now. Just tell me the truth. Is what she's saying true? Are those your children?" The silence that followed was suffocating. Chief Donald looked at the twins, the boy with his eyes, the girl with his nose, and something in him crumbled. "Yes," he whispered, "and they're mine." Mrs. Donald made a sound like a wounded animal. James took a step backward, his face a mask of shock and betrayal. And Emily, seeing that she'd won, sat down on the expensive leather sofa and crossed her legs. "Now," she said pleasantly, "let's talk about inheritance." The sitting room felt like a pressure cooker about to explode. Mrs. Donald stood frozen, her hand gripping the back of a chair so tightly her knuckles had gone white. James looked like he'd been punched in the stomach, his face pale, his usual easy smile nowhere to be found. Chief Donald sat in his wheelchair, tears streaming down the left side of his face, the side that still had feeling. His right side remained paralyzed, frozen, useless. And Emily sat on the sofa like a queen holding court, her twins standing awkwardly behind her, clearly uncomfortable with the destruction their mother was causing. "Inheritance?" Mrs. Donald finally found her voice. It came out as a whisper, then grew stronger. "You want to talk about inheritance? My husband just confirmed he has children with another woman, and you want to talk about money?" "It's not about the money," Emily said smoothly, though her eyes said otherwise. "It's about my children. They deserve to know their father. They deserve to have their name, to be acknowledged." "Acknowledged?" Mrs. Donald's voice cracked. "They're standing in my house, aren't they?" "I'd say they're pretty acknowledged." "Rebecca, please." Chief Donald tried. "Don't." Mrs. Donald held up a hand, not even looking at him. "Don't you dare speak to me right now." She turned to Emily, and when she spoke again, her voice was steady, controlled, dangerous. "How long?" Emily blinked. "Excuse me? How long has this been going on? When did this affair start? When did he? 15 years ago, Emily supplied helpfully. "We met at a conference in Abuja. Your husband was charming, successful. We had a few drinks. One thing led to another." "Stop!" James's voice cut through the room like a blade. He was shaking, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. "Just stop talking." Emily looked at him with something like pity. "I'm sorry you're finding out this way, but you deserve to know the truth." "The truth?" James laughed, but there was no humor in it. "The truth is you're a homewrecker who's showing up at our house 15 years later demanding money." "I'm not demanding anything," Emily said calmly. "I'm simply ensuring my children get what's rightfully theirs. Your father has been supporting us financially for years, but we've been living in secrecy, in shame. I don't want that for them anymore. They deserve better." "What they deserve," Mrs. Donald said quietly, "is a mother who doesn't use them as bargaining chips." Emily's carefully composed expression flickered. "How dare you? How dare I?" Mrs. Donald's voice rose. "You slept with my husband. You had his children, and now you're in my house, sitting on furniture I bought, breathing air I pay for, and you have the audacity to talk about what your children deserve." The twins shifted uncomfortably. The girl, she looked about 16 with long braids in her father's eyes, spoke up was the first time. "Mommy, maybe we should go." "We're not going anywhere," Emily snapped at her daughter. "Not until this is settled." Chief Donald made a sound, something between a tube and a groan. His good hand reached out toward his wife. "Rebecca, please. Let me explain." For a moment, Mrs. Donald just stared at him. 40 years of marriage, 40 years of building a life together, of building a business from nothing, of raising James, of dreams and plans and promises, all of it crumbling in a single afternoon. She walked over to her husband slowly, knelt down so she was eye level with him. "Explain what?" she whispered. "Explain how you went on a business trip and came back with a secret family? Explain how you've been lying to me for 15 years? Explain how every time you said, 'I love you,' you were hiding this." Her voice broke. What could you possibly say that would make any of this okay? Chief Donald's tears fell faster. It was a mistake. One night I had too much to drink. Don't blame alcohol, Mrs. Donald said sharply. Men use that excuse to justify everything. You made a choice. You made many choices. To sleep with her, to keep in contact, to support them, to lie to me. Those were all choices. I couldn't just abandon them, Chief Donald said desperately. When she told me she was pregnant, I did a DNA test. They're mine, Rebecca. I couldn't turn my back on my own children. But you could turn your back on me. Mrs. Donald stood up, her legs shaking. You could look me in the eye every day for 15 years and not tell me the truth? I was afraid. Chief Donald's words came out garbled, his stroke making them difficult to understand, but the emotion was clear. I was afraid of losing you. I was afraid of destroying our family. I thought I could handle it quietly. I thought I could keep everyone happy. Well, congratulations, Mrs. Donald said bitterly. You've made everyone miserable instead. James hadn't moved from his spot near the door. He was staring at his father like he'd never seen him before. Dad, he said quietly, all my life you told me to be honest, to have integrity, to treat people with respect. You were my hero, my role model. So I wanted to be exactly like you, his voice cracked. How could you do this? Chief Donald's face crumpled. I'm sorry, son. I'm so sorry. I never wanted you to find out like this. I never wanted you to find out at all. So you were just going to lie forever? James shook his head. What was the plan? Take it to your grave? Yes, Chief Donald whispered. Yes, that was the plan. The admission hung in the air like a confession of murder. Emily cleared her throat. As touching as this family therapy session is, we still haven't discussed the important matter at hand. Mrs. Donald turned to her slowly. What matter would that be? My children's stake in the company, their place in the Donald family, their inheritance. Their inheritance, Mrs. Donald repeated. You want them to inherit from a company I built with my money? Emily's eyes narrowed. It's still Chief's company. Built with my trust fund. Mrs. Donald's voice rose to a shout. When I met your precious Chief, he was a nobody, a farmer's son with big dreams and empty pockets. I'm the one who took my father's trust fund and invested it in his business idea. I'm the one who worked 18-hour days alongside him to make that company successful. M.E., not him. M.E. exclamation mark. Emily's face had gone pale. So don't you dare sit in my house and demand a piece of what I built, Mrs. Donald continued, her voice shaking with rage. Your children can have their father's name if they want it so badly. But my company, over my dead body. It's not just your company, Emily said, but there was less confidence in her voice now. Chief owns half. Chief owns nothing, Mrs. Donald said coldly. Check the papers. Check the business registration. I own 51% of Donald Enterprises. I'm the majority shareholder. I've always been the majority shareholder. I just let him be CEO because I loved him, because I trusted him. Well, that was clearly a mistake. James stepped forward, his voice weary. Everyone, please, can we stop fighting for a second? James, Mrs. Donald started. No, Mom, let me speak. James ran a hand through his hair, looking suddenly much older than 32. This is insane, all of this. Dad is sick. The doctor said he doesn't have much time left. We can't spend his final days fighting over money and shares and inheritance. Your mother started it, Emily muttered. No, James said firmly. You started it when you showed up at our gate demanding things, but I'm going to finish it. He turned to Emily. You want your children acknowledged? Fine, they're acknowledged. You want them to have a stake in the company? Fine, they can have shares. The company is big enough. There's enough for everyone. James, you can't be serious, Mrs. Donald said. I am serious, James said quietly. Mom, I know you're hurt. I'm hurt too, but those kids didn't ask to be born. They didn't ask for any of this. They're innocent in all this mess, and they're my siblings, apparently. The word felt strange in his mouth. Dad asked me once to always be fair, to always do what's right, even when it's hard. Well, this is hard, but it's the right thing to do. Mrs. Donald stared at her son with something like disbelief. You're too kind for your own good. Maybe, James said with a sad smile, but that's how you raised me. He turned to Emily. Here's what's going to happen. Your children will be added to the family registry. Their names will be included in Dad's will. They'll get a stake in the company, a small one, but enough to secure their future. But you, he pointed at Emily, you get nothing. Not a house, not a car, not shares, nothing. This is about them, not you. Emily's face twisted. That's not fair. Life isn't fair, James said bluntly. You broke up a marriage. You kept secrets for 15 years. You showed up here making demands like you have any right to be here. You're lucky I'm willing to do even this much. The girl twin spoke up again, her voice small. Mr. James, we don't want to cause problems. If it's too much trouble, it's not trouble, James said gently. You're family, and family takes care of each other, even when things are complicated. The boy twin, who hadn't said a word until now, looked at James with something like wonder. Thank you, he whispered. James nodded. Then he turned to Emily. Where are you staying? Emily hesitated. We don't have anywhere to go. We were evicted from our apartment. That's why I came here. James closed his eyes briefly, as if praying for patience. You can stay here. Temporarily, until we figure something else out. James, no, Mrs. Donald said sharply. Mom, they have nowhere to go. That's not our problem. It's Dad's problem, James said quietly, and Dad is our family. So it's our problem too. Mrs. Donald looked at her son, her kind, generous, too good for this world son, and felt something crack inside her chest. Fine, she said, her voice hollow. They can stay. But I don't want to see them. I don't want to talk to them. I don't want them near me. Understood? James nodded. Understood. He turned to Emily. There's a guest wing on the east side of the house. You and your children can stay there. Samuel will show you the way. Don't disturb my mother. Don't make demands. And don't push your luck. You're guests here, not family. Remember that. Emily opened her mouth like she wanted to argue, then seemed to think better of it. Thank you, she said stiffly. As James led Emily and the twins out of the sitting room, Mrs. Donald collapsed into a chair. She looked at her husband, her betrayer, her partner, the man she'd loved for 40 years, and felt nothing but exhaustion. I don't know if I can forgive you for this, she whispered. Chief Donald's tears hadn't stopped. I know, he said, his words slurred but clear enough. I don't know if I can forgive myself. They sat in silence, two people who had built an empire together now sitting in the ruins of their marriage, with nothing left to say. The next few weeks were tense. Emily and the twins moved into the East Wing. Mrs. Donald avoided them like they carried the plague. James tried his best to be fair to everyone, which mainly meant he was exhausted all the time from playing mediator. Chief Donald's health continued to deteriorate. The stroke had been severe, and despite physical therapy and medication, he was getting weaker. The doctors had started using phrases like "Wayne, limited time, and get your affairs in order." James threw himself into work, staying late at the office, taking on more projects than necessary, anything to avoid being home, where the tension was so thick you could cut it with a knife. But he never, ever forgot his evening ritual. Every day at 6 p.m., no matter how busy he was, no matter how stressed, he'd leave the office and drive home. And every day, Lolo would be waiting at the gate. Good evening, Mr. James. Evening, Lolo. I got you suya today. Extra spicy, the way you like it. Thank you, Mr. James. God bless you. It was the one constant in his life, the one thing that made sense when everything else was falling apart. Lolo didn't know about Emily. She didn't know about the betrayal or the secret children or the family drama. She just knew that Mr. James was good, that he brought her food and smiled at her and treated her like she mattered. And in return, she waited for him every single day, without fail. It was the purest relationship in James's life. He had no idea how much he'd come to depend on it, or how much that loyalty would eventually save his life. 3 weeks after Emily moved in, Chief Donald called for a family meeting. He looked terrible, gaunt, pale, his eyes sunken. Even breathing seemed to take effort. "I need to update my will," he said. His speech labored. "James is right. The children need to be included." Mrs. Donald said nothing. She sat in the corner of the room, her face a mask, staring at nothing. The lawyer was called. Documents were prepared. Chief Donald's will was amended to include the twins, 5% of the company shares each, split from his own portion. Mrs. Donald retained her 50%. James had 40%. The twins now had 10% between them. Emily received nothing except a monthly allowance of 1 million naira for life. When the lawyer read out the terms, Emily's face went rigid. 1 million naira, she said carefully. "That's it?" "That's more than generous," the lawyer said. "It's a lifetime allowance, Mrs." "Miss," Emily corrected sharply. "It's Miss." "Miss Emily," the lawyer continued, "the chief has been very fair." "Fair would be giving me a house," Emily interrupted. "Fair would be giving me shares. I was with him for 15 years. "You were his mistress for 15 years, Mrs. Donald said, speaking for the first time. "There's a difference," Emily's eyes flashed. "I gave him children." "So did I," Mrs. Donald said coldly. "I also gave him a business. A life. 40 years of loyalty. What exactly did you give him besides heartache?" The room fell silent. Chief Donald looked between his wife and his mistress, and for the first time, seemed to truly understand the magnitude of what he'd done. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm so sorry to everyone. I've destroyed everything." James stood up abruptly. "The will is done. The children are provided for. Can we just try to have some peace in this house? Dad's dying. Don't we want his last days to be peaceful?" Mrs. Donald's eyes filled with tears for the first time since this whole nightmare began. "I don't know what I want anymore," she whispered. James crossed the room and pulled his mother into a hug. She collapsed against him, finally allowing herself to break down. And across the room, Emily watched with calculating eyes. She'd gotten some of what she wanted, but not all of it, not nearly all of it. She looked at Mrs. Donald, with her designer clothes and her jewelry and her 50% stake in a multi-billion naira company, and felt envy burn in her chest like acid. That could have been her, should have been her. If only Chief hadn't been such a coward. If only he'd left his wife like Emily had wanted him to. But he hadn't. He'd chosen Rebecca. Always Rebecca. Well, Emily thought, watching Mrs. Donald cry in her son's arms. There were other ways to get what she wanted. She just had to be patient and smart and ruthless. Chief Donald died 6 weeks later. It was a quiet death. Peaceful, the doctor said. He simply went to sleep one night and didn't wake up. The family was devastated. Mrs. Donald, despite everything, had loved him. She'd forgiven him in those final weeks, couldn't bear to let him die without knowing she still loved him, even if she didn't trust him anymore. James was crushed. His father, his hero, his mentor was gone, and their last months together had been tainted by betrayal and secrets. Even Emily cried at the funeral, though whether from genuine grief or performance, no one could tell. The burial was attended by hundreds. Chief Donald had been well known, well respected. People came from all over Lagos to pay their respects. After the burial, the family returned to the house in silence. The weight of loss hung heavy over the mansion. Emily retreated to her room in the east wing with her twins, her face carefully arranged in grief. But once the door closed behind her, the mask slipped. She sat on the edge of the bed, staring at her manicured nails, her mind racing. Chief was dead. The will had already been read while he was alive. The terms were final. Mrs. Donald had all the properties and 50% of the company. James had 40%. Her children had 5% each, and she had a monthly allowance of 1 million naira. 1 million naira. The words tasted bitter in her mouth. She looked around the guest room. Beautiful, yes, but not hers. Nothing in this house was hers. The furniture, the art on the walls, the very roof over her head, it all belonged to Rebecca Donald. Emily had played the long game. She'd waited 15 years, believing that eventually Chief would leave his wife, that eventually she'd become the first wife, the only wife, the one with the power and the money and the respect. But he'd never left Rebecca, not even when Emily had threatened to expose him. Not even when she'd cried and begged and told him she loved him. He'd always chosen Rebecca, and now he was dead, and Rebecca still had everything. Emily stood and walked to the window, looking out at the expansive grounds of the Donald estate, the manicured lawns, the fountain, the luxury cars parked in the driveway. This should have been hers. Her jaw clenched. Well, Chief might have failed her, but that didn't mean the game was over. Rebecca was old, tired, grieving, and James, sweet, kind, naive James, was too good for his own good. Emily's lips curved into a slow smile. There were other ways to get what she wanted. She just needed to be patient and smart and ruthless. Her eyes drifted to the bottle of sleeping pills Dr. Mike had prescribed for her weeks ago when she'd complained of insomnia. Dr. Mike. Now there was an interesting thought. Dr. Mike had been the Donald family physician for 30 years. He had access to everything: medical records, prescriptions, the family's complete trust. And Emily had noticed something during Chief's final weeks. Something in the way Dr. Mike's hands shook when he wrote prescriptions. Something in the way he avoided eye contact. Something desperate in his demeanor. Emily had grown up poor. She knew what desperation looked like. And desperate people could be useful. She picked up her phone and scrolled through her contacts until she found the number Dr. Mike had given her months ago. Just in case you need anything, he'd said. She stared at the number for a long moment, then set the phone down. Not yet. She needed to be smart about this, strategic. First, she needed to secure her position in the house, make herself indispensable, make sure they couldn't just kick her out once the initial shock of Chief's death wore off. Then she could start phase 2. Emily walked to her closet and pulled out a simple black dress, modest, appropriate for mourning. She needed to play the role of the grieving, almost widow, the devoted mother just trying to do right by her children. She needed to make James trust her, and once she had his trust, well, anything was possible. 2 weeks after the funeral, Emily made her first move. She started small, subtle. "James," she said one morning, catching him in the hallway before he left for work. "Do you have a moment?" James paused, his briefcase in hand, his face tired. The last few weeks had aged him. "What is it, Emily?" "I just wanted to say thank you," she said softly, "for everything you have done for my children, for letting us stay here, for giving them a chance at a better life. I know I came in here like a hurricane making demands, causing chaos. I'm sorry for that. I was desperate, but you've been nothing but kind, and I want you to know I appreciate it." James looked surprised. This was the first time Emily had shown any humility since arriving. It's fine," he said carefully. "They're family." "They are," Emily agreed, "and so am I, in a way. I know your mother doesn't see it that way, and I understand, I really do. But I hope that maybe, one day, we can all find a way to coexist peacefully, for the children's sake." James softened slightly. This was what he'd wanted all along, peace in the house. "I'd like that," he admitted. Emily smiled, warm, genuine, perfect. "Good. Because I want to help. I know this house has been chaotic. I know the staff is overworked. I thought maybe I could help manage things. Take some of the burden off your mother. She's grieving, and I know she doesn't want to deal with household matters right now. James hesitated. On one hand, his mother would probably hate the idea of Emily taking over anything. On the other hand, his mother had barely left her room in 2 weeks, and the household was starting to fall into disarray. "Let me talk to her," James said finally. "Of course," Emily said sweetly. "I don't want to overstep. I just want to help." As James walked away, Emily's smile widened. Phase 1, complete. Mrs. Donald, as predicted, hated the idea. "Absolutely not," she said from her bed, where she'd been spending most of her time since the funeral. "I don't want that woman running my household." "Mom, someone needs to do it," James said gently. "The staff is confused about schedules. Bills aren't getting paid on time. The house is falling apart. Then you handle it." "I'm running a company," James reminded her. "I am at the office 12 hours a day. I don't have time to manage household affairs." Mrs. Donald closed her eyes. She knew he was right, but the thought of Emily, Chief's mistress, running her house made her stomach turn. "Fine," she said finally, "but I don't want to see her. I don't want to hear her. She can manage the staff, but she stays out of my way." "Deal," James said, relieved. And just like that, Emily had power in the Donald household. She started small, reorganizing the kitchen, adjusting the staff schedules, making sure everything ran smoothly. The staff, initially wary of her, began to warm up. She was efficient, organized. She actually listened to their concerns, something Mrs. Donald, in her grief, hadn't been doing. "Ms. Emily is not so bad," the cook remarked to the gardener one day. "Better than the madam these days," the gardener agreed. "At least she talks to us." Emily heard the whispers and smiled. She was making herself essential, irreplaceable. And once she had full control of the household, once the staff trusted her more than they trusted Mrs. Donald, then she could move to phase 2. It started with the tea. James had always been a creature of habit. Every evening when he came home from work, he'd have a cup of chamomile tea before dinner. It helped him unwind, he said, helped him sleep. Emily noticed this routine and decided to make herself useful. "I'll prepare Mr. James's tea," she told the kitchen staff one evening. "You all have enough to do." The cook, grateful for one less task, happily agreed. Emily made the tea perfectly. Chamomile with a hint of honey, just the way James liked it. She served it to him with a smile. "Thank you, Emily," James said, surprised. "You didn't have to do that." "I want to help," Emily said warmly. "You've been so good to my children." "It's the least I can do." James sipped the tea and smiled. "It's perfect." "Thank you." Emily watched him drink it, her expression pleasant, her mind calculating. For now, the tea was just tea. But soon it would be something more. She just needed one more piece of the puzzle. She needed Dr. Mike. 3 weeks after Chief Donald's funeral, Emily called Dr. Mike. "Hello?" His voice sounded tired, stressed. "Dr. Mike, it's Emily. I was wondering if you had time to meet. I've been having trouble sleeping again, and I'd like to discuss my prescription." There was a pause. "I can send the prescription to your pharmacy. I'd prefer to discuss it in person," Emily said smoothly. "Perhaps we could meet for coffee?" "I know a quiet place near the estate." Another pause. Longer this time. "All right," Dr. Mike said finally. "Tomorrow afternoon?" "Perfect," Emily purred. "I'll text you the address." She hung up and smiled. The game was about to begin. The next day, Emily dialed Dr. Mike's number again. "Dr. Mike, it's Emily. I need to see you, very urgently." There was a pause on the other end. "What's this about?" "I can't discuss it over the phone," Emily said carefully. "We need to meet. It's important. We could meet somewhere outside the estate, a cafe perhaps, or my office." "No," Emily interrupted firmly. "That would arouse suspicion. People would wonder why we're meeting so soon after Chief's death. Let's meet inside the estate, somewhere quiet. I'll sneak out of the house. Pretend I'm going for a walk. It won't look suspicious at all. It will just be brief. There's something important I can't share on the phone that I need to talk to you about." Dr. Mike hesitated. "All right. Where?" "There's a small kiosk near the front gates of the estate, just outside. Do you know it?" "I do. Meet me there this evening." 6 o'clock. Park on the street outside the gates and walk to the kiosk. We'll be quick." "Fine," Dr. Mike said, his voice tight. 6 o'clock. Emily hung up and smiled. That evening, Emily changed into casual clothes, jeans and a simple blouse. She told the household staff she was going for a walk. "I need some air," she said with a tired smile. "Clear my head a bit. The grief, you know." The staff nodded sympathetically and let her go. She walked casually through the estate, taking her time, nodding at a few neighbors she passed. To anyone watching, she was just a woman taking an evening stroll to cope with loss. When she reached the front gates, she walked through them and headed toward the small wooden kiosk that sat about 50 meters down the road. It was a simple structure that sold soft drinks and snacks during the day, but by evening it was always closed, its metal shutter pulled down, the owner long gone. The area was quiet, deserted, no one around. Perfect. Emily stood by the kiosk, pretending to look at her phone while she waited. What she didn't know, what she had no way of knowing, was that just inside the estate gates, partially visible from the road, sat a modest wooden shelter. Lolo's home. Chief Donald had built it for her 15 years ago. 4 sturdy wooden walls, a tin roof to keep out the rain, and a small opening for a door. Simple but solid. It was positioned near the gates so Lolo could see everyone coming and going, so she could wait for Mr. James every day. And at that very moment, Lolo was inside, lying on her thin mat, resting after the day's heat. She heard voices, close by, very close to her shelter. Lolo went still, listening. A few minutes later, Dr. Mike appeared, walking quickly from where he'd parked his car on the street. He looked nervous, his eyes darting around. "Emily," he said quietly when he reached her at the kiosk. "Thank you for coming," Emily replied, glancing around to make sure they were alone. "Let's make this quick." "What's this about?" Dr. Mike asked, his voice tense. Emily looked around once more, then spoke in a low voice. "I'm going to be direct, Doctor. I know about your gambling problem." Dr. Mike's face went pale. "I don't know what your Flamingo Casino," Emily interrupted. "You're into them for about 8 million naira, maybe more by now, with the interest they charge." Inside the shelter, Lolo listened. Dr. Mike's jaw clenched. "How did you—" "I have friends who know things," Emily said simply, "and I paid your debt. 3 days ago, 8 million naira. You're free now." Dr. Mike stared at her. "Why would you do that?" "Because I need your help," Emily said, "and now you owe me." "I'm not going to—" "Yes, you are," Emily said firmly, "because if you don't, I'll make sure everyone knows about your gambling problem. The medical board, your patients, the Donald family, your reputation will be destroyed. And I'll sue you for that 8 million naira. You'll lose everything, your practice, your license, your freedom." Dr. Mike's hands clenched into fists. "What do you want?" "I want what should have been mine," Emily said. "Rebecca Donald has everything, the houses, the company, the wealth, the respect. I've been the secret, the hidden woman for 15 years. Well, not anymore. I'm going to take what I deserve." "What does that have to do with me?" "James," Emily said simply. Inside the shelter, Lolo heard the name. "Mr. James." "What about James?" Dr. Mike asked cautiously. "I need him incapacitated," Emily said. "Not dead, not immediately, just sick enough that he can't run the company anymore. Sick enough that questions arise about his ability to lead. When he's at his weakest, when the board starts doubting him, I'll step in. My children will inherit his shares, and I'll manage everything until they come of age." There was a long silence. "You want me to make him sick," Dr. Mike said slowly. "You want me to poison him." "I want you to help me," Emily corrected. There must be something, some compound, some medication that would cause symptoms gradually. Something that looks like natural illness. Stress, fatigue, high blood pressure, nothing that would kill him immediately, just something to weaken him over time, to make him wither away slowly until he's too weak to fight back. Inside her shelter, Lolo heard everything. There is something, Dr. Mike said finally, his voice hollow. A compound, very rare. It slows the heart rate gradually, causes headaches, dizziness, fatigue. The symptoms look like stress. In small doses over time, it's almost impossible to detect. The immune system weakens. The person just fades. Perfect, Emily breathed. Can you get it? I have connections, medical research contacts, but it will take a few days. How long? 3 days, maybe 4. Get it, Emily commanded. And when James starts getting sick, I'll call you to examine him. You'll find nothing wrong, of course, just stress, grief from losing his father, overwork, all perfectly normal. And when he gets worse, you'll run more tests that come back inconclusive, Emily said. You'll be the concerned family doctor doing everything possible. But sadly, medicine just can't figure out what's wrong. By the time anyone thinks to look deeper, it'll be too late. This is wrong. This is survival, Emily said coldly. And you owe me 8 million naira. So unless you want to lose everything, you'll do exactly as I say. We're in this together now, doctor. Dr. Mike said nothing. After a long moment, he turned and walked away. Emily looked around one more time, satisfied no one had seen them, then headed back into the estate. Inside the shelter, Lolo sat in the darkness. She had heard everything they said about Mr. James. 3 days later, Dr. Mike sent Emily a text message. Package ready. That evening, Emily went for another walk. She met Dr. Mike at the same spot by the kiosk. This time, their meeting was even briefer. Dr. Mike handed her a small glass vial. The liquid inside was clear as water. How much? Emily asked. 3 drops, Dr. Mike said. Mix it in liquid, tea, juice, anything. Once a day, no more than that, or the symptoms will appear too quickly. Emily took the vial and slipped it into her pocket. Thank you, doctor. Dr. Mike said nothing. He just turned and walked away. Emily headed back into the estate, a smile on her face. Emily began that very night. For weeks now, she had been preparing James's evening chamomile tea. The staff had gotten used to her taking over this task. That night, when Emily made James's tea in the kitchen, she waited until no one was looking. Then she pulled out the small vial and carefully added 3 drops to the cup. The liquid dissolved instantly. No trace, no smell, no color change. She carried the tea to James's study. Your tea, James, she said warmly. James looked up from his work and smiled. Thanks, Emily. You're a lifesaver. He drank it. Emily watched, then left. For the first 3 days, nothing happened. James went about his routine normally. Morning jogs, work, evening tea. By the 4th day, he mentioned to his mother that he had a headache. Probably stress, Mrs. Donald said. Yeah, probably, James agreed. Emily continued adding 3 drops every evening. By the 2nd week, James was experiencing frequent headaches and dizziness. I think I should see Dr. Mike, he told his mother. Dr. Mike was called to the house. He examined James thoroughly. Everything looks normal, Dr. Mike said. Just stress. You took over a major company and lost your father. Try to rest. James nodded, relieved. But he didn't get better. By the 3rd week, he could barely function. The headaches were constant. The dizziness was severe. The fatigue was overwhelming. They took him to different hospitals. Every doctor ran tests. Every doctor found nothing. By the 5th week, James collapsed during a board meeting. He was rushed to the hospital. More tests. Nothing. Extreme exhaustion, the doctor said. You need complete rest. James was sent home. Emily continued bringing him tea every evening, with 3 drops of poison. On a Friday evening, 6 weeks after the poisoning began, James came home early, barely able to stand. He went straight to his bedroom. Emily brought him his tea. "Drink this," she said sweetly. "It'll help you sleep." James drank it all. That night, Emily had added 6 drops, double the dose. By 6 a.m., when Mrs. Donald went to check on James, she found him unconscious, barely breathing. She screamed. An ambulance was called. James was rushed to the hospital. Dr. Mike examined him. Then he came out, his face grave. "I'm so sorry, Mrs. Donald," he said. "James is gone." Mrs. Donald's scream echoed through the hospital. "No, not my son." Dr. Mike filled out the death certificate. Time of death, 3:47 a.m. Cause cardiac arrest. James Donald was dead. Emily stood in the corner, her face arranged in grief, but inside she was smiling. The funeral was scheduled for 3 days later. For 3 days, Lola waited at the estate gates, every morning, every evening, waiting for Mr. James. But he never came. She tried to ask people, but they shooed her away. Then she heard people talking. "The funeral is tomorrow. They're burying him at the cemetery." Lolo's eyes went wide. They were going to bury Mr. James, but Mr. James wasn't dead. She had heard the evil woman's plan. The poison was supposed to make him weak, make him wither, not kill him, not yet. Mr. James was alive, and Lolo was going to save him. The burial day arrived, and the entire Sunrise estate was draped in mourning. By 9 a.m., the Donald family's private cemetery, a beautifully manicured section at the far end of the estate where generations of Donalds had been laid to rest, was filled with hundreds of people. They came in their black clothes, their faces solemn, their voices hushed. The wealthy in their designer suits and dresses, the employees in their modest Sunday best, the street vendors who had known James from his morning jogs. Even rival company CEOs came to pay their respects, because James Donald had been that kind of man, the kind who transcended business rivalries and social classes. White plastic chairs were arranged in neat rows before the freshly dug grave. A canopy had been erected to shield the immediate family from the sun. Flowers, roses, lilies, orchids were everywhere, their perfume heavy in the morning air. At the front, positioned on a stand draped in white cloth, was the mahogany coffin, polished to a mirror shine. Expensive, elegant, closed, except for the glass panel that allowed mourners to see James's peaceful face one last time. Mrs. Rebecca Donald sat in the front row, a black veil covering her face, her body rigid with grief. She hadn't eaten in 3 days, hadn't slept properly. Her sister sat beside her, holding her hand, whispering words of comfort that didn't penetrate the fog of devastation. Behind them sat Emily and her twins. Emily wore a perfectly tailored black Chanel dress, her makeup flawless, her tears delicate and photogenic. She played her part beautifully. The grieving, almost stepmother, the woman who had tried so hard to be part of the family, only to lose James just when they were getting close. The twins looked genuinely sad. They had liked James. He'd been kind to them when no one else was. Pastor Williams took his position at the head of the coffin, his worn Bible in his hands. He cleared his throat, and the murmuring crowd fell silent. "Dearly beloved," he began, his voice carrying across the cemetery, "we are gathered here today to lay to rest a son, a friend, a leader." James Donald was only 32 years old, but in his short life, he touched more hearts than most people do in 80 years. Mrs. Donald let out a soft sob. Pastor Williams opened his Bible. "To everything there is a season and a time to every purpose under heaven. A time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to pluck up that which is planted." No! The word tore through the cemetery like an explosion. Everyone's head whipped around. The pastor's voice died. The birds stopped singing. At the back of the crowd, shoving her way through the mourners with wild desperation, was Lolo. Her purple dress was even more tattered than usual. Her feet were bare, caked with dirt. Her hair stood out in all directions like she'd been pulling at it. Her face was streaked with tears and grime, but her eyes blazed with fierce determination. "No, no, no," she screamed, pushing past people who stumbled out of her way in shock and disgust. "He not dead. He not dead." "What on earth?" someone muttered. "Who let the mad woman in here?" "This is a funeral, someone get her out." But Lolo wasn't listening. She was charging toward the coffin like a woman possessed, her arms outstretched, her voice rising to a wail. "He alive. He alive. Not dead. Mr. James not dead." Mrs. Donnell lifted her head, confusion cutting through her grief. Through her veil, she could see Lolo stumbling toward them, tears streaming down her weathered face. "Save him! Save him!" Lolo shrieked, and then her bony finger shot out pointing directly at Emily. "She evil. She evil. She kill him. She poison." The crowd gasped. Whispers exploded like firecrackers. Emily's carefully composed face went pale. "What is she talking about?" she said loudly, her voice trembling with just the right amount of shock. "Why is this woman pointing at me? I don't even know her. She evil. She poison. She poisoned Mr. James," Lolo screamed, now just feet from the coffin. "Save him. He alive. Alive." Big Joseph, the head of estate security, stepped forward. "All right, Lolo, that's enough. Come on now, let's get you out of here." He reached for her shoulder. Lolo spun on him with the speed of a striking snake. She grabbed a thick branch from beneath a nearby tree and swung it at his head with shocking force. "Don't touch me," she roared. "He alive! Mr. James alive!" Big Joseph jumped back, hands raised in surrender. He'd learned years ago not to underestimate Lolo when she was angry. 2 more security guards tried to approach from the sides, hoping to corner her. Lolo swung the branch in a wide arc, and they both scrambled backward. "Someone stop her!" a woman in the crowd shouted. "This is disgraceful! Call the police!" But the security guards knew better. Once Lolo got like this, there was no stopping her without someone getting seriously hurt. The pastor looked helplessly at Mrs. Donnell, clearly unsure how to proceed. Lolo was at the coffin now. She dropped the branch and grabbed at the lid with her dirty, trembling hands, trying desperately to pry it open. "Get her away from there." Emily's voice was sharp, commanding. How dare she put her filthy hands on him? "Someone do something." "No touch! No touch!" Lolo screamed at the men approaching her. "He alive! Mr. James alive!" And then a voice cut through the chaos. "Stop!" Mrs. Rebecca Donnell stood up. Slowly, deliberately, the crowd fell silent. Mrs. Donnell walked toward the coffin, her black veil fluttering. The mourners parted for her automatically, their faces etched with pity and confusion. When she reached Lolo, she didn't try to grab her or push her away. She just stood there looking at the wild, desperate woman who had been part of their lives for 15 years. "Lolo," Mrs. Donnell said quietly, "what are you trying to tell me?" Lolo's eyes locked onto hers. "Mama," she whimpered, her voice cracking. "Mama, he alive. Mr. James alive. Not dead. Not dead. Lolo, sweetheart, I know you loved him. I know this is hard to accept." "No!" Lolo shook her head violently, tears flying. "Not hard. True, he breathing. She pointed at Emily again. "She poisoned him. Evil woman poisoned Mr. James. I hear. Mrs. Donnell's heart lurched. "What do you mean you heard?" But Lolo wasn't listening anymore. She was focused entirely on the coffin. "Save him, Mama. Save him. Please." Mrs. Donnell looked down at her son's face behind the glass. So peaceful, so still, dead. Or was he? She thought about the past few weeks, James's mysterious illness, the symptoms that came from nowhere. The doctors who found nothing. Dr. Mike, who kept saying it was just stress. Dr. Mike, who had also been Chief's doctor. Chief, who had also died suddenly. Something cold slithered down Mrs. Donald's spine. "Open it," she said suddenly. The funeral director stepped forward, flustered. "Ma'am, I don't think—" "I said open the coffin." There was steel in her voice, the same steel that had built an empire. The funeral director hesitated, then signaled to his assistant. Together, they fully opened the coffin lid. James lay there in his charcoal suit, his hands folded over his chest, his face serene. He looked like he was sleeping. Just sleeping. Lolo didn't waste a second. She lunged forward and placed both her weathered, calloused hands on James's chest, and she started pressing, pumping, frantically with no technique or rhythm. Just desperate, raw love. "Breathe, Mr. James! Breathe! Wake up! Wake up!" The crowd watched in stunned, horrified silence. "This is madness," someone whispered. "She's desecrating the body. Someone stop her." But Mrs. Donald held up her hand. "Let her try." "Rebecca, this is—" her sister started. "Let her try." Mrs. Donald's voice cracked. Lolo kept pressing, pumping. Her face was twisted in concentration and desperation. "Come on, Mr. James. Come on. Lolo here. Lolo save you. Wake up. Wake up." And then it happened. James coughed. It was soft. So soft that people in the back rows didn't hear it. But Mrs. Donald heard it. Her hand flew to her mouth. James coughed again. Harder this time. His chest heaved beneath Lolo's hands. The cemetery erupted in screams. "Oh my God! He's alive! Jesus Christ, he's alive!" People jumped to their feet. Some ran forward. Others stumbled backward in shock. A woman fainted. Emily's face had gone from pale to green. Lolo kept pumping James's chest, tears streaming down her face. "Yes! Yes, Mr. James, wake up! Wake up!" James's body convulsed. He coughed violently, his back arching. "Somebody call an ambulance!" Mrs. Donald screamed, "Now!" Right now, 3 people pulled out their phones at once. A young woman pushed through the crowd. "I'm a medical student. Let me help," Lolo snarled at her initially, but Mrs. Donald put a hand on Lolo's shoulder. "It's okay. Let her help save him." Reluctantly, Lolo moved aside. The medical student immediately took over, performing proper CPR compressions. "His pulse is there," she said, her voice shaking with disbelief. "It's very weak, but it's there. His breathing is extremely shallow. How is this possible? The death certificate was signed 3 days ago." Mrs. Donald's head snapped toward Dr. Mike, who was standing near the back of the crowd. His face was the color of spoiled milk. Sweat poured down his temples. His hands trembled. Their eyes met across the cemetery. And Mrs. Donald knew. She knew everything. "Don't let him leave," she said to Big Joseph, pointing at Dr. Mike. "Don't let him leave this cemetery." Big Joseph moved immediately, positioning himself between Dr. Mike and the exit. Then Mrs. Donald turned slowly to look at Emily. Emily was backing away, her carefully composed mask completely shattered. Her eyes were wide with panic. Her hands were shaking. "Don't you dare move," Mrs. Donald said, her voice low and dangerous. "Security. Grab her. Don't let her leave either." 2 security guards moved to flank Emily. "This is insane," Emily said, her voice rising. "I haven't done anything." "This woman," as she pointed at Lolo, "is clearly delusional. You can't seriously—" "Shut up," Mrs. Donald said coldly. "Just shut your mouth." The ambulance arrived 6 minutes later, sirens wailing. Paramedics rushed to James with their equipment. They checked his vitals, loaded him onto a stretcher, connected him to oxygen. "We need to get him to the hospital immediately," the lead paramedic said. "I don't know how he's alive, but we need to move now." Mrs. Donald climbed into the ambulance without a word. Before the doors closed, she looked at Big Joseph. "Keep Emily and Dr. Mike here. Don't let them talk to each other. Don't let them leave. I'll send the police." "Yes, ma'am." The ambulance door slammed shut and the vehicle sped away. Lolo stood in the cemetery watching it go. tears still streaming down her face. "Lolo, save Mr. James," she whispered to herself. "Lolo, save him." At Lagos State University Teaching Hospital, James was rushed into the ICU. Doctors swarmed around him, running tests, drawing blood, checking vitals. Mrs. Donald stood outside the ICU, pacing, praying, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles were white. After what felt like an eternity, a doctor emerged. "Mrs. Donald? How is he?" she demanded. "Is he going to be okay?" "He's alive," the doctor said, and she could hear the bewilderment in his voice. "His heart rate is extremely low. His breathing is shallow, but he's definitely alive. We're running toxicology tests now, but Mrs. Donald, I have to ask, was your son taking any medications? Any substances?" "No, nothing. He was healthy before—" She stopped. "Before he got sick 6 weeks ago." "What were his symptoms?" "Headaches, dizziness, fatigue. He saw doctors, multiple doctors. They all said he was fine. Just stress." The doctor frowned. "This doesn't look like stress. His symptoms suggest some kind of toxic exposure, possibly poison." The word hung in the air like a knife. "How long will the toxicology test take?" Mrs. Donald asked. "A few hours for preliminary results. But Mrs. Donald, if he was poisoned, we need to know what substance we're dealing with." "Do you have any idea now?" "I have an idea, ma'am," Mrs. Donald said grimly. "And when you find it in his blood, I'm going to make sure the people responsible pay for what they did." 4 hours later, the toxicology report came back. The doctor's face was grave when he showed it to Mrs. Donald. "Your son has a very rare plant-based toxin in his system. It's called—" He pointed to a complex chemical name on the report. "It's derived from a certain South American plants. It's almost never seen in cases like this because it's so difficult to obtain. It slows the heart rate gradually, mimics symptoms of stress and hypertension. In the doses your son received, it was designed to kill him slowly. Can you save him?" Mrs. Donald's voice shook. "We are treating him now. We have the antidote, but Mrs. Donald, he came very close to death. If he'd been buried—" The doctor trailed off. Mrs. Donald closed her eyes, not wanting to imagine it. "How was it administered?" and she asked. "Most likely ingested, mixed into food or drink over a period of weeks." Mrs. Donald pulled out her phone and made a call. "I need the best private investigator in Lagos," she said when someone answered. "Money is no object. I need someone who can get me evidence that will hold up in court, and I need them at my house within the hour." By evening, a man named Mr. Adeyemi, former police commissioner, now the most sought-after private investigator in Nigeria, was sitting in the Donald mansion study. Mrs. Donald sat across from him, her face hard as stone. "I believe my son was poisoned," she said without preamble, "and I believe I know who did it. But I need proof, ironclad proof." "Tell me everything," Mr. Adeyemi said, pulling out a notebook. Mrs. Donald told him about Emily, about the suspicious timing of James's illness, about Dr. Mike being the family physician, about Lolo's accusations at the funeral. Mr. Adeyemi listened carefully, taking notes. "I'll need access to everything," he said. "Security footage, financial records, phone records, James's medical files, and I'll need to search Emily's room." "You have it," Mrs. Donald said. "All of it." Mr. Adeyemi worked fast. Within 2 days, he had built a damning case. The security footage from the estate gates showed Dr. Mike entering the estate multiple times in the evenings, always parking outside and walking to the kiosk area near Lolo's shelter. More footage showed Emily leaving the house for walks at exactly the same times. Mr. Adeyemi interviewed the kitchen staff. They confirmed that Emily had taken over making James's evening tea about 2 months ago. "She was very particular about it," the cook said. "Said Mr. James liked it a certain way. We were happy to have one less task." A search of Emily's room revealed the glass vial, now empty, hidden in her dresser drawer. It still had trace amounts of the poison. The lab confirmed it matched what was in James's blood. But the most damning evidence came from the financial records. Mr. Adeyemi traced a payment of 8 million naira from Emily's account to Flamingo Casino, specifically marked as paying off Dr. Mike's gambling debt. And he found text messages between Emily and Dr. Mike discussing the package and the plan. One message from Emily read, "Make sure you declare him healthy. Nothing wrong, just stress." Dr. Mike's response, "This is wrong." Emily's reply, "You owe me 8 million. Do what I paid you to do." Mr. Adeyemi presented everything to Mrs. Donald in a thick folder. She read through it, her hands shaking with rage. "Is this enough?" she asked. "More than enough," Mr. Adeyemi said. "This is attempted murder, conspiracy, fraud. They're both going to prison for a very long time." Mrs. Donald picked up her phone. "Get me the commissioner of police," she said. The police arrived at the Donald mansion that evening with a warrant. Emily was in her room packing. She'd been planning to disappear, take the twins and run before anyone figured it out. She looked up in horror when officers burst through her door. "Emily Williams, you are under arrest for the attempted murder of James Donald and conspiracy to commit murder." No, this is a mistake. I didn't do anything." But the handcuffs clicked around her wrists anyway. Dr. Mike was arrested at his home, where they found research documents about the poison and contacts for obtaining it. He didn't even try to resist. He just sat there, looking defeated. "I never wanted this," he whispered as they led him away. "She forced me. She blackmailed me." "Tell it to the judge," the officer said. James woke up 5 days after the funeral that wasn't. His eyes fluttered open, and the first face he saw was his mother's. "Mom?" His voice was hoarse, barely audible. Mrs. Donald burst into tears. "Oh, thank God. Thank God, thank God, thank God. What happened? Where am I?" "You're in the hospital, baby." "You were poisoned. Emily and Dr. Mike poisoned you. But you're okay now. You're going to be okay." James's eyes widened. "Emily? Dr. Mike? Why would they?" "For the company," Mrs. Donald said bitterly. "For money and power. But they failed, thanks to Lolo." "Lolo?" James looked confused. "She saved your life," Mrs. Donald said, squeezing his hand. "At your funeral. She wouldn't let them bury you. She knew you were alive. She fought off security guards and started pressing on your chest until you started breathing again." "She saved you, James." Tears filled James's eyes. "Where is she? Is she okay?" "She's been standing outside the hospital for 5 days," Mrs. Donald said with a soft smile. "The nurses tried to send her away, but she refuses to leave. She's waiting for you." "Bring her in," James said immediately. "Please, I need to see her." A few minutes later, Lolo was escorted into the ICU room. She looked terrified of all the machines and the sterile white walls, but when she saw James awake in the bed, her face transformed. "Mr. James!" She rushed forward. "Mr. James alive!" "Hey, Lolo," James said, his voice weak but warm. "I heard you saved me." "Lolo here, evil woman," Lolo said, the words tumbling out. "Lolo here, she want poison you, make you sick. Lolo hear everything. By the kiosk. Evil woman and evil doctor. Talk about hurting Mr. James. Lolo listen. Lolo know. So Lolo save you." James reached out and took her weathered hand in his. "Thank you, Lolo. You're my guardian angel. You know that?" Lolo beamed, her gap-toothed smile radiant. "Mr. James, good to Lolo. Lolo protect Mr. James, always." Mrs. Donald watched them, tears streaming down her face. This woman, this dismissed, ignored, called crazy woman, had saved her son's life, had refused to give up on him when everyone else had. "Lolo," Mrs. Donald said softly, "thank you. Thank you for saving my baby." Lolo looked at her. "Mama not cry. Mr. James okay now. Lolo save him." "Yes, you did," Mrs. Donald said. "You saved him." 3 months later, Emily and Dr. Mike stood trial for attempted murder and conspiracy. The evidence was overwhelming. The poison vial, the text messages, the The financial records, the security footage, James's testimony, the medical reports. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours, guilty on all counts. Emily was sentenced to life in prison. Daughter Mike sentenced to 25 years and stripped of his medical license permanently. As they were led away in handcuffs, Emily turned and looked at Mrs. Donald sitting in the gallery. "This should have been mine," she hissed. "It should have been mine." "You were never worthy of it," Mrs. Donald said coldly, "and now you have nothing." James made a full recovery. It took months of treatment and physical therapy to undo the damage the poison had done to his body, but eventually he was back to himself. One of his first acts after returning to work was to make sure Lolo was taken care of. He set up a trust fund for her, enough money to make sure she'd never want for anything for the rest of her life. He tried to get her to move into proper housing again, but Lolo refused. "Lolo likes shelter," she insisted. "Papa built for Lolo. Lolo stay." So James had the shelter renovated, added electricity, installed a heater and a fan, made sure it was comfortable. And every single day, without fail, he visited her, brought her food, sat with her, talked to her, because Lolo had saved his life. And James Donald never forgot the people who loved him. As for Emily's twins, Mrs. Donald had wanted to cut them off completely. "An apple doesn't fall far from the tree," she'd said, but James had begged her to show mercy. "They didn't know, Mom. They're innocent in all this. Dad asked me to take care of them." So reluctantly, Mrs. Donald agreed. James bought the twins a home in another estate, far from Sunrise. He continued to provide for their education and needs. He honored his father's will and kept their 10% share of the company. But they were not welcome in the Donald mansion. And James made it very clear. One wrong move, one hint that you're anything like your mother, and it's over. Understood? They understood. News of what happened spread throughout Lagos like wildfire. The mad woman who saved a man from being buried alive. The mistress who tried to murder her way into a fortune. The loyal friend who refused to give up. People in Sunrise Estate started treating Lolo differently. They stopped calling her the mad woman. They started calling her the angel. They brought her gifts, food, clothes, toys. She became something of a local celebrity. But Lolo didn't care about any of that. All she cared about was that every morning at 6 a.m., she'd hear footsteps, and Mr. James would appear, jogging past her shelter. "Good morning, Lolo." "Good morning, Mr. James." And every evening at 6 p.m., she'd stand at the estate gates, and Mr. James would drive through, honking his horn and waving, and he'd hand her a package of food. "Fried chicken today, Lolo. Your favorite." "Thank you, Mr. James. God bless you." That was all Lolo needed. That was all she'd ever needed. Someone who saw her, who valued her, who loved her, and she would protect that love with everything she had, because that's what angels do. They protect the people they love, even when no one believes them, even when everyone thinks they're crazy, even when they have to stand alone against the world. Angels never give up. And Lolo was the greatest angel Sunrise Estate had ever known. Thank you for watching. What do you think of this story? Let me know of your thoughts in the comment section below. Until I bring another intriguing story your way again, bye for now.